I'm Chief. Welcome to Chief Logic. Reset without reinventing yourself. We're on code 4, calendar honesty. Most people don't need a better plan. They need a calendar that tells the truth. Because what we call busy is often just a polite way to avoid admitting we're overloaded or unfocused or saying yes to things we don't even respect. A calendar is supposed to be a tool, but for a lot of people, it turns into things that we just store on paper. You schedule the workout you haven't earned room for. You schedule the writing session you haven't protected. And you schedule the project time that disappears the moment something real shows up. Then the week happens, the calendar collapses, and you walk away thinking you lack discipline. That's not always a discipline problem. Sometimes it's an honesty problem. Reality works like this. Your calendar is a map of your priorities, but it's also a map of your self image. A lot of people schedule what they wish they were. They schedule the version of themselves who wakes up early, eats clean, responds fast, trains consistently, creates daily, and never gets tired. Then they spend a week living as the version of themselves that actually exists, and the friction between those two versions creates guilt. Calendar honesty is the reset that fixes that friction without requiring you to reinvent yourself. Because the point of a calendar isn't to look ambitious. The point is to be usable. It should reflect your actual life, not your preferred identity. And when it doesn't, the calendar becomes a reoccurring disappointment that you personally absorb as failure. The mechanism is simple. When your calendar is dishonest, your week becomes reactive by default. A dishonest calendar, packed too tight, scheduled too optimistically, and designed with no respect for transition, recovery, or spillover. It assumes every task starts on time, ends on time, and costs only the minutes written on the block, even though most work has setup time, wind down time, and mental residue. It also ignores that your attention can't snap cleanly between unrelated demands without a cost. So what happens is predictable. One meeting runs long, one call gets heavy, your child calls you with something, and now your entire day is behind. The dishonest calendar doesn't bend, it just fails. And when it fails, you start improvising. You cut corners and choosing whatever feels urgent in that particular moment. That's how priorities die, not from the lack of desire, but from a lack of space. The consequence of calendar dishonesty isn't just missed tasks, it's the slow erosion of self trust. If your calendar repeatedly tells you you're going to do something and you repeatedly don't, you train yourself to treat your own commitments as optional. You stop believing your future plans because your past plans have been unreliable. That turns into a specific pattern. You stop scheduling the things that matter and you start leaving them as someday. And someday is where important things go to die quietly. It also warps how you feel about your life. You can have a decent week and still feel behind because the calendar you wrote was just not relevant. The calendar you wrote was just impossible. You can make progress and still feel like you failed because you didn't complete the fantasy version. That kind of constant shortfall creates a background anxiety people call stress, but it's really the feeling of living under expectations you can't meet. Calendar honesty is how you remove that pressure without lowering your standards. It's not about doing less forever. It's about telling the truth long enough to build control. Here's the practical rule. Your calendar has to include the costs you keep pretending don't exist. If you schedule meetings, you schedule transition. If you schedule deep work, you schedule the ramp in and the ramp out. If you schedule errands, you schedule travel and recovery. If you schedule training, you schedule hygiene, prep, and the fact that your body will be different after. If you schedule creation, you schedule the friction at the start, the editing tail at the end, and the mental residue that follows. That isn't softness, that's accuracy. An honest calendar also has buffers that are not negotiable, not giant empty days, but real breathing room that protects you from the fact that life is not a straight line without buffers. You don't have a week, you have a chain reaction. Most people hear that and think, so I can't do much. No, you can do a lot, but you can't do a lot at the same time. And you can't do it all at full intensity every day. Calendar honesty forces you to face the real constraint: capacity. Capacity isn't about being motivated, it's just pure math. And this is where the reset gets uncomfortable because you can't be honest with your calendar without being honest about your relationships and your yeses. A dishonest calendar is often propped up by a dishonest social life. You're telling people you're available when really you're not. And you're accepting things you really don't have room for. You're leaving open time that isn't really open because it's actually recovery time. It could be family time or mental reset time, and you keep spending it like it's spare change. The calendar doesn't lie on its own, and the version of you it represents is the one you keep trying to live up to. If you want control, stop using the calendar as a wish list and start using it as a contract with yourself. The goal isn't to fill it, the goal is to make it believable because a believable calendar is something you can repeat. Here's a real world example. Somebody decides they're going to reset their output. They block 2 hours a day for content creation because they want to be consistent and they want to grow. And it looks responsible on paper. It also collapses by Wednesday. Those 2 hours were imaginary. They were placed on the calendar without subtracting anything else. They didn't account for meetings that run long, emails that spill over, the mental just drainage after a conversation, and the fact that creation requires a clean mental surface. So the block keeps getting pushed, shortened, or just plainly sacrificed. And now the person feels like they failed to stay consistent. They didn't fail consistency, they failed calendar honesty. Now the shift is simple. Instead of blocking 2 hours a day, they block 3 sessions a week that are protected, placed in the quietest parts of the schedule, and surrounded by a buffer. They also cut one recurring commitment that was stealing energy. The total time might even be less on paper, but it becomes real time, not pretend time. And because it's real, it repeats. That's how output builds, not from ambition, from protection. Control comes from a few specific moves. First, stop scheduling based on your best day and schedule based on your normal day because your best day is a bonus, not a baseline. Second, treat your calendar like a budget. If you spend time in one place, you can't spend it somewhere else. And the whole week gets clearer when you live like that's true. Third, keep one daily block that exists to catch spillover, not because you love flexibility, but because your schedule needs a shock absorber. Fourth, make your priorities visible. If something matters, it gets a block. If it doesn't get a block, you don't get to call it a priority. Finally, build the habit of rescheduling, not deleting. If a block gets disrupted, you don't erase it and call it a loss. You move it because you're training yourself to honor the commitment, even when the day isn't clean. And that's how you keep continuity. Calendar honesty isn't glamorous. It won't make you feel inspired. It will make you feel clear. And clarity is what most people are missing. When the calendar tells the truth, you stop fighting yourself. You stop dragging guilt from day to day. You start making decisions that match your capacity. And once your calendar becomes believable, your life becomes easier to steer. You don't need a new personality. You need a schedule that reflects the person you actually are and a few constraints that protect the person you're trying to be. Stay sharp, stay grounded.